Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Insight with Political Tours, live from Des Moines, Iowa. There seems to be little doubt that Donald Trump will be facing Joe Biden this November if the landslide victory he's just won here is anything to go by. With over 50% of the vote across the whole of the state, it's hard to see how his competitors can claw their way back into making this a competitive race. So the question we're asking here is, how and why does America seem so ready to vote for Donald Trump once again? I'm going to be joined in a second by Bradley Knott, I hope, who's a political strategist who works here in Iowa, and Dave Swenson, an academic and specialist on rural Iowa. Hello and welcome, Dave. For starters, how are you, Dave?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. It sounds pretty blustery where you are. Are you in the car there?
I am in the car, and I am driving down an interstate.
Brad, how are you doing there? I know you've been driving too. You've just gone out to, I think, to Carroll, which is on the western side of Iowa.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm sorry about this lighting here. I'm going to try to fix that.
Don't worry about the lighting too much. The important point is that you're there. The first thing I'm going to do for everyone who's watching and who may not be aware is just show everyone how much Trump won Iowa by. So I just want to bring up. This is the New York Times website, and they've got a fantastic interactive map where we can see, if I go back up here, this is the state broken down by precinct and county. So there are 99 counties across Iowa, and then 1,600 precincts. And you can see, with very few exceptions, if you go down, if we zoom in perhaps into some of the like into the Des Moines area, you'll see that some of those precincts are turquoise, which is Nikki Haley, and then I think if we find we might find a few for Ron DeSantis and a few other areas. But you can see really across the board, Donald Trump has won, but also won convincingly. So if we bring the map up again here, you can see the percentage there across the state of the majority that he has. So dark red is over 50%, and you can see that's really most of the states. A quite stunning, really, victory for him, Brad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented victory in terms of caucus results in the last, with 50 years there have been caucuses. Nobody's won with that kind of margin. Maybe Mondale in '84 was pretty decisive, but it's been a long time since we've seen anything like this. And, even when Mondale won, he didn't sweep counties like Trump did in terms of, I heard on the radio driving back, he was one vote shy of carrying Johnson County too.
What's that? What's the significance of that?
Just 100% winning every county versus sweeping the state versus 98-1. I don't think it's very significant at all. It's just sort of historical little incident. One more vote, he would have swept the caucus, first person ever to do that. But anyway, that's not terribly significant.
I guess, what we've heard since then is that it's as though he is running as the incumbent. What do you make of that?
Well, I make of that Trump is a very arrogant person. But that clearly was the way he conducted the campaign. He had Secret Service around him because ex-presidents do. And I think that played to his, great man theory. Yeah. That he is the chosen one, as and for other folks, like when we went to that Trump rally, they really set the thing up by playing music, the chosen one, great man theory, strong man, savior. And then they had speakers came out and basically followed that theme. And then this, dark music, like they introduced basketball teams now. And then Trump comes out and he's just staring blankly into the crowd while they're cheering wildly for him. And he doesn't acknowledge that it was a real stage theater, but that was the
I
one.
have to say that was a really spooky moment. You've got the whole
That
crowd
was-
sort of shouting in adulation, and he's just standing there, dead still with his MAGA cap on, and lapping it up. That was a very surreal moment. We'll come back to that in a second. But the reason why we're here in Iowa is that this is an amazing place. You get to see the campaigners, you get to see the candidates close up. But for the candidates themselves, just explain why Iowa is significant. Why do they come to Iowa? What's the hope if you're trying to get the nomination and you haven't got the lead that Trump has? What do you hope to do?
Well, Iowa's not the place that selects the nominee. Typically, it's the place that eliminates candidates along the way. So if you're coming to Iowa, you want to be where the first vote is going to take place. So the typical strategy is to go 99 counties, shake as many hands as possible, basically suck up to the Iowa people as much as you can, just to try to get that big media splash of the network night of the election. I'm back when it was
hard. Lends itself to people who are not just looking for a sort of national advertising campaign. It's actually how you've got to have a ground game. You've got to be able to do it face to face, doorstep to doorstep, fairs. You've actually got to see people personally.
Yeah, I mean, there are the jokes of the people in Iowa and in New Hampshire. Presidential candidates in person yet? Yes, but only once. I need to see them at least 6 times before I decide which one I can vote for. And when you have 16 people running for president, like in 20 in the Democrats and 16 for the Republicans, that's a lot of meetings, a lot of people, a lot of time spent in state. And it's all for the bump. It's all for the headlines and the perception that you have momentum, because these elections in the primaries, especially, they reset after every election. I mean, it's going to be a new ball game in New Hampshire now because of what happened tonight.
Yeah. Okay. But, I mean, just remind us. Trump at 51%. Those are the results there. 51%. DeSantis 21, and then Haley 19. In a second, we're going to talk about where that support for Trump comes from, and we had a fascinating trip in Western Iowa, really getting into sort of much more sort of provincial and rural areas, and I think we got a fantastic insight into why people might support the former president. It's interesting to me also, Brad, and I hope Dave's going to chip in a second when we're sure that the line's okay, that it was surprising that actually DeSantis and Haley actually did better than expected, better than the polls had initially suggested, Brad.
I'm sorry, are you asking me if I'm surprised?
Yeah. I mean, I think the polls initially over the weekend were saying 14 and 16%. So they got about 5 more points each than expected.
Yeah. Now, that could have come from Trump vote dropping out because people were so confident he was going to win. But to answer your question, I wasn't surprised because I thought votes was going to consolidate pretty rapidly, and so it moved up a couple of points, but they didn't move far. Yeah. It's hard to look at that and say any one of those has momentum vis-a-vis Trump coming out of Iowa. Yeah. But among each other, that's a different story. But DeSantis seemed to have regained the momentum.
Okay. I do want to remind people of the conditions. If you don't know, outside it's about minus 20 degrees Celsius. I think it's minus 7 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope I've got those temperatures right. And what I'm going to do, unusually, is I'm going to turn the screen around just so that everyone can see. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here now. And if I can manage to do that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. It should be back on me, and I'm going to turn the screen around here, and hopefully you can see the weather outside. There we go. Those are the conditions that people are having to deal with. And over the last week, we've seen cars off the road, snowplows, and literally we have been snowed in for 2 days where we couldn't go out of the town that we were in because the conditions were so bad. And it's really the wind sweeping the snow across the road and having big snow drifts that means you can't go anywhere. And when you go out in this weather, I'll turn this back on me. When you go out in this weather, you've got, I think this was on Saturday, we were in Des Moines, and I took a photograph of the Capitol building here, and just walking out, my cheeks were beginning to freeze up, and just taking the photograph, my hands were numb very, very quickly. So it's actually pretty dangerous weather, and that in a way has contributed to the low turnout. Just over 100,000 people voted, whereas normally, Brad, it could be about 160,000 or so. Is that right?
Yeah, I think 187 was the highest Republicans have ever done, and 200,000, I think, was when Obama, Clinton, and Edwards finished 1, 2, 3, 2008.
Okay. Well, we began in Omaha, which is in Nebraska, but it's the nearest airport to Western Iowa. And then we moved to a town called Denison. And I just want to explain a bit to get into the scene there. And I think this is so valuable because I think that it's while Iowa is very conservative, it gives you an understanding of why so many people might still vote for the president, despite him having 91 indictments, despite what happened on January the 6th. So, Dave, could you paint, Dave, if you're there, just talk a bit so we can test your line?
Yeah, I'm here now. I'm parked. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you clearly. I'm just going to turn up the volume. If you may need everyone to turn up the volume to be able to hear Dave. So if you need to turn up the volume on your computer, please do so. Dave, just paint the scene. We went to the county committee of the area surrounding Denison. What's the name of that county?
Crawford County.
Crawford County. Just paint the scene there that we went to visit to.
Sure. After visiting a little bit in the town and sort of getting a feel for the community, we were invited to the county central committee meeting where they were going to plan their caucus activities and allocate responsibilities and make sure that everything went smoothly. Now, when we went to that meeting, we were met by the county caucus chair. And forgive me for forgetting her name, but anyway, she was willing to entertain questions. She was willing to tell us a lot about who she was and why she cared about what she was doing. And she was willing to talk to us about her political beliefs and the strength of her political beliefs. The group was able to ask her questions and to not necessarily interrogate, but to try to get a good feeling for what it was she thought was important and why it was she thought things were important. Now, one of the things that stood out for us immediately was that these people weren't really talking up Trump. They weren't really talking up DeSantis. They weren't talking up Haley. They were talking up Ramaswamy. And they had a sense that for one reason or other, Ramaswamy was going to be their guy. And if you look at their numbers, I don't think it happened in any other county. Ramaswamy came in second in Crawford County. So it was an interesting group of people with a different kind of slant on, well, yes, Trump is our favorite, but we also have an idea on something else. I want to offer up something. This is what I heard earlier, though, and I don't know whether this is salient or not, but you raised the point that Trump was essentially the incumbent. If he was the incumbent, he barely pulled half of all of those voters. Let's say 95% of the caucus voters voted for him last time. And so I don't know, but there's a piece of me that says, yes, indeed, he had this blowout in Iowa. But then there's another part of me that said, but close to half didn't express him as their first choice.
Yeah, what I want to focus on perhaps a bit is the kind of people they were, and the sort of the atmosphere in the room. I mean, I think the fundamental thing is that we know that they're going to support Trump at the next election, and whoever their candidate was, they were going to get behind him. That was the sense that I got. It was
Yep.
the rule was the people in the room were mostly, they had grey hair. They were in their 70s, some older. And this isn't a town, Denison, which has got a significant minority population. In actual fact, as much as 70% of the town is made up from ethnic minorities. Yet they have no representation there in the Republican Party. They've got no representation on the city council, and in the administration too. We know that they're in the meatpacking industry there. They work in agriculture. They're a fundamental part of the economy. And Eileen Saylor, who ran that committee, said we could not do without our Mexicans. This town would not be able to survive without them. Yet they had no representation. I found that very interesting. And then the second point for me was some of the statements that were made there, which really about in antipathy towards Biden. This is the thing that really struck me, that whilst some of them might have been uncomfortable with what Trump was going to do, Biden was clearly the greater evil. Brad, do you remember some of the things? Brad, you had to leave, didn't you? Because you had to leave a bit earlier. But perhaps you can say a bit, Brad, and then we'll come to Dave in a second.
Yeah, I mean, Denison, but also I think across the board, it's kind of the issues that they talked about was interesting. And then the issues they didn't talk about, I think, with some reflection, I was driving back here today, I started to think about that, with the significance of some of that. But border. We heard a lot about the chaos at the border and la-di-da about that, and how getting the country back or we're going to lose the country if we mix this blood and things like that sort. And you said they talked about the terrible economy, and it was ironic. We have lowest unemployment rate in my lifetime, and the stock market just hit a record high. And I drove 100 miles and looked at gas prices, and I barely saw anything above $3. So they talked about that. Like the economy was bad, inflation. The border was key. Well, but I thought it was interesting. They seem to have stopped talking about election denialism. They want to put 2020 behind them. And I wonder if that isn't going to create some, I think the Republican, and I'm running on issues here and I apologize, but I think we're at the seams.
Okay, you broke up there at my end there, Brad. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I said I think the Republican Party is breaking up at the seams around Trump.
No. Yeah.
I don't know how big the pieces are going to be, but you look at those returns last night, figured pretty close.
I have to say you're a Democrat, and so may not be the most impartial judge of that. But let's come to that thought about the breakup of the Republican Party in a second. But Dave, that was for me the most. These were lovely people. They were very generous. They were very welcoming. But they seemed to be living a different reality. They weren't overly critical of Trump, but they certainly thought the economy was a disaster under Biden. There was one guy next to me who said whatever. Well, he was a Trump supporter, and he said several things. He said that everything that Trump did was fantastic. The economy was better. The stock market was better. He is the solution. Those were his comments, but I thought in general they seemed to be living a different reality. They all thought that the economy had tanked under Biden, when it's clearly not the case.
Yeah, it is clearly not the case. And not only is the economy is doing quite well, considering what it's been through all of the years. Places like Crawford County have unemployment rates that are closer to 2%. Their own economy is probably pretty good. The fact that indeed what I thought I heard them saying was they were getting their words from the political advertisements as opposed to their own critical analysis of what exactly were the circumstances. I heard a lot of people saying exactly the same words that the politicians, most especially Trump, were voicing in their ads. And remember, we are inundated, deluged with ads on a constant basis. As a consequence of being the first in the nation. So that's part of what I heard. The disconnect between their incredible dependence on an immigrant workforce and yet their disgust with regard to what they think is a crisis at the border that they describe in almost apocalyptic terms is I thought very, very interesting. They describe our borders. They always use the word open. We have open borders. And in that open borders, what we have coming through those open borders are drugs and terrorists. And they have keyed in on two things. You know, the whole idea of scaring people. That's the kind of language that they were using. So a critical, sober, I've read the newspaper and I've looked at the facts kind of analysis of what's going on in the economy, in society, with regard to political activity, who is responsible for what and not responsible for what, with regard to the evolution of policy here in the United States. None of that, I heard none of that discussion except one farmer. One farmer was willing to say he thought what Trump did with regard to the tariffs in China were hurtful to farmers, and his support was soft. That was the only outright dissent I thought I heard, except for one other person who said, well, you know, he kind of gets in trouble and he goes off at the lip and he does this and he does that, but he's not my first choice, but I will vote for him.
Yeah. I was struck. I thought it was white, it was Christian, it was nationalist, which brings me to another meeting we had, which is with a journalist, a friend of yours, Brad, called Doug Burns. And he said a fascinating thing about Trump, and this really sort of, I think this is the right prism to look through when understanding what's happening. He said, don't think of Trump as a political leader. Think of him as a religious leader. Now, that I don't think that means that everyone who follows him is following him for evangelical reasons. It's about belief. Brad, what did you make of those comments?
Exactly true. We've been, talking like that for a while. As a rhetorician and a persuader and someone who does strategic communications, it's really hard when you don't even begin with the same set of facts. I mean, they don't. So it's a huge challenge to try to talk to them because they don't need facts. It's hard to persuade.
Yeah.
When the truth is not accepted because of its source. Trust was huge issue. Are you in the tribe or are you outside the tribe? And that's pretty much.
And I thought it was mutually reinforcing. These people, they said normal people vote Republican. It's just the crazies who vote for the Democrats. And so this is a situation where we abroad think, my God, these people are completely crazy. They're voting for Trump. Yet it's completely flipped when they look at it. They look at Democrats threatening the Republic, threatening democracy. It's Biden who's undoing everything. They're chasing after Trump with all these trials. They're clearly the system is fixed against him, and we need to save our republic by voting for Trump and getting him back in. And so that was striking. So that I want to move away from Western Iowa and then come to the rallies which we saw. And Dave, you weren't with us for that, but we'll come back to you in a second. Brad, you were. We went to see Donald Trump speak. We saw Nikki Haley speak, and then we were at Ron DeSantis's election night rally, and all very different experiences. Brad, when you saw Nikki Haley's talk, she spoke about policy, she spoke about foreign policy, she talked about what her administration was going to do in the first 3 months. It's all clearly well thought out. But how would that pitch go down with Republicans of today?
Well, 1 out of 5 of the most conservative in Iowa supported her. But I think that what struck me about the Haley versus Trump was that her crowd was in a wealthier part of the state, the community, of the neighborhood was West Des Moines. And I would say they were a lot more educated and willing to have a reason. When I unfortunately couldn't keep my mouth shut, and when they say some things that aren't truthful, I mentioned that to somebody standing next to me, and it seemed like at the Haley event, there were a lot of people who recognized what I was saying. At the Trump event, they looked at me like they wanted to kill me. That's why I got out and left early. I was a little worried about that. So, but Haley is a much more traditional Republican, even though she spouts out some crazy policies. Her approach, her appearance, her language, her generational theme, was much more in the tradition of how you see campaigns, at least run in Iowa. That seemed much more like what I was used to. And then with Trump, I don't know what remains of the Republican Party after Trump, but I don't think that the MAGA element is going away. I hope that other people will be able to make inroads in that party and, be willing to make government work instead of just break it. Yeah. But right now, that's the majority of the Republican Party is break it.
Dave, we're going to come to you in just a second, but just to follow up there, when we went to see Donald Trump talk, there was you had to go in and be checked by the Secret Service. He had Secret Service standing either side of the podium. You clearly knew that this was a former president, and the images of him, that has an impact on people. But the key thing was he spoke for 1 hour, 45 minutes. I was checking my phone after a while, looking at messages. He loved it. He was ready to keep on going, and the crowd loved it. They absolutely adored it. He could do no wrong. So that was very striking. And then when we went to the DeSantis party, he had 3 speakers come up before him, and when he just had no charisma. He didn't have any pizzazz. And I think really now more than ever, talking about policies, yes, there are ads talking about policy. You can have all you can put your program out very clearly, but that doesn't matter to people here. It's really gut feeling, and Trump needs to appeal to that. Dave, are you still there? I know you weren't at those rallies, but you've been bombarded with adverts over the last year. What pitches matter as far as you see?
You're going to have to ask that again. I didn't quite catch it.
So I was talking about Nikki Haley earlier and her, use of talking about talking points, talking about policies, and then Trump, who has a very different approach, is to talk about feelings and generally negative feelings, and focusing on the negative and not really talking about policy at all. You've been bombarded with ads over the past year. You understand rural Iowa. What works?
Yeah, well, it's kind of complicated because when you look at rural Iowa, especially the farm economy, depends a lot on ag policy, and ag policy is a big part in any given year of farmers' incomes. And so rural Iowa is highly dependent in many, many ways on federal government intervention and or support or underwriting their day-to-day living and their economic opportunities. Yet on the other side, they will espouse libertarian sounding things that we need to get government out of people's lives. We need to get government to be smaller. We need that's kind of the theme. So that contradiction is just continuous when you listen to these ads and when you watch or you listen to what people talk about, and then you try to compare it to what you hear with regard to the ads. They're going rah 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 when they hear these anti-government messages, and yet they're not rah 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 when it comes to getting subsidies or crop supports or subsidized crop insurance or PPP loans during the the COVID crisis or whatnot. So that's one of the things. So what do you get in the ads? You get from Trump's ads, you just simply get apocalyptic language that blames Biden for many, many things or makes clearly false assertions that are assertions that may have been true with regard to the conditions of the economy in April 2020, but they are not true anymore. And so you got to be very, very careful. When you looked at Haley's advertisements tended to be much more general. They talked about competence. They talked about leadership. They talked about good governance. They tended to be aligned with, if not an actual policy prescription, at least a suggestion of a policy direction with regard to her ads. DeSantis's ads sounded like they were just Trump light. sometimes, and then Trump squared other times. They were either doubling down on themes that Trump was had articulated, and or was trying to slightly pull some differences. But those are what the ads are. And then we don't know who the ads are being sponsored by or who's running what, because a large fraction of these ads, and we have no idea who are the sources of them, they're dark money ads. They're not campaign ads. They're from the dark money. And we probably got 3 dark money ads for every actual campaign ad.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to turn our attention now. I do want to get questions from people. So please, can you put your questions in the Q&A box or raise your hand? There's a hand sign there, but it's best if you write your questions down in the Q&A box, and then you can put your questions directly to Brad and to Dave Swenson, or even me. I think this is an obvious thing to say. I mean, clearly the caucuses give the party that's caucusing a huge amount of publicity, and the Republicans have got a huge amount of publicity from this. So let's put that to the side. That's a given. But the Democrats appear incredibly weak. If the economy is going well, yet Trump is being credited with running the economy better, it's an absurd position. How do the Democrats get out of this, and why don't they have a clear message, Brad? What's going on?
Oh, you are a TV guy, aren't you, huh? Asking those questions. Well, what's going on is, I think the prospect for the general election, if that's what you're referring to, is pretty good for the Democrats. I really do. Of course, I'm a Democrat.
Pretty good, you're saying. You're pretty good.
Yeah, I think their prospects are pretty good. Running against Trump is going to motivate the base as well as anybody else. Now, I think that you're just going to keep pounding the message. Well, Democrats just have to continue pounding the message going forward about the economy and about infrastructure and all of the things that he has accomplished. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, took on DeSantis in a one-on-one debate on Fox News about a month ago. I personally would like to see other governors challenge other governors, or Democrat, Republican, national debate with all of our bench. We got a lot of good governors out there, some good senators, some good cabinet members. And just to get more voices. I mean, when you go to the election in November, you choose a Democrat or Republican. It's not just for president, and it's the policies of those parties are going to be carried out in the ranks of the party, the elected legislators and things like that. So we should get those people out there. I mean, if our problem is how Biden looks, let's give them a lot of other looks.
Right. Okay. And Dave, what's your take? I mean, we know that Brad has been a paid-up Democratic consultant, so we know where his interests lie, and I have every sympathy with them. But Dave, you're possibly, you're an unpaid observer, although you're certainly to the left in U.S. politics. What's your take on the Democrats' message? What would you like to see them do?
Sure. First of all, I think the Democrats have a set of strong fundamentals that they can put forward. And I think that they're going to put that strong message, again, infrastructure, the strength of the economy, the fact that we've had reasonably good success in this administration at passing a set of landmark laws that are beneficial to the nation, the fact that unemployment is low, the fact that real wages are growing. You can just go on and on and on. The fact that everybody keeps
why isn't that message getting across? I mean, across rural conservative Iowa, right. That message doesn't get through at all.
Yeah, but you're not going to change conservative Iowa with those kinds of messages. What you want to do, generally and broadly, is to consolidate that same support that he had 4 years ago. But you can't be getting the noise right now with the Republican. It's only one side right now that's primarying, and that's caucusing. Why would you waste your ads right now in this cacophony of noise, this Republican noise? Wait a while. I suspect that the game plan is to wait a little bit and then to start moving forward. President Biden came out last week with a very, very strong speech, undergirding his accomplishments. He's made speeches in South Carolina. He's slowly starting to move this forward, and that is what's going to happen. The other part of that, though, is it's got to be 50% positives, where you're hammering Biden's positives and superlatives, and the other half has to be, you have to be hammering this quagmire that Trump finds himself in, that all of the indictments, all of the guilty finding that's occurred either in civil trials or criminal trials, all of that needs to also be put front and center. And the combination of the positive image of Biden's successful first term stacked against Trump's horrific appearing situation with regard to his criminal and civil liabilities that seem to be accumulating. That seems to be the point forward. And again, when are we going to start seeing that? We're going to start seeing that in the spring, slowly going to increase as we get closer to the summer, and then it's just going to be full bore from the middle of summer on. The American voter, you saw this when we talked to a few people. You saw this when we talked to that server at the hotel restaurant, where you ask them who they support, and they automatically say, "I haven't been thinking about that yet." They're not living the world of politics. They're living the rest of the world. People like you and Brad and to a lesser degree me, but me too. We do care about that stuff, and we pay a lot of attention. But a lot of people just don't pay any attention to this stuff until it's time to start making a decision.
Yeah. Okay. I get your point there. Listen, we've got questions coming in. We'll take questions from Alan Livingston, Audrey Wolfe, and Sarah Biffin in just a second. I do want to say that, I mean, there are signs of divisions, as Brad alluded to, within the Republican Party. Kim Reynolds, who's the governor here in Iowa, backed Ron DeSantis, and we heard privately that it was 50-50 whether she was going to back DeSantis or Kim or Nikki Haley, and really over a concern. This was a background briefing, so we can't see where it came from, but the suggestion was she was concerned about another Trump presidency. I think we've got pictures of Kim Reynolds somewhere around when we saw the rally, the election night rally with DeSantis. Yeah, so we'll see those photos in just a second. But if we can bring up Alan Livingston's question, there was a really good question that we did discuss, but I don't think it was addressed too much. But let's have a look. Alan, your question, please.
I can't hear.
Yeah, for the first time, Alan, you actually sound like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck there. I don't know why. But your question was there any discussion of foreign affairs of Ukraine and Israel? Did anyone raise the question of Biden's age and Trump's age? Well, let's put the age question to the side for a second. But we did talk about foreign affairs. There was certainly Nikki Haley talked about Israel, the importance of Israel being the spear in the Middle East, and everyone backing Israel. But there wasn't too much discussion about Israel apart from that, and there wasn't any mention of Ukraine, was there, Brad?
Well, we had a long one with Steve King on Ukraine. But that's in terms of the candidates. Let's make a distinction. So this is very important. So in terms of the candidates in their campaign, really no discussion of Ukraine at all, no mention of Ukraine at all. No, I think Nikki Haley did, didn't she? I think she was.
She did.
She did. Nikki Haley did. Yeah, she did.
Type it in.
Yeah, significantly. Yeah, she was very forceful, and I'm wrong there. So she was talked about the importance of backing Ukraine. Go on, Brad.
In the Republican Party, especially that tiny segment of it that we saw, was support for Israel is part of that's assumed. That's presumed. 100% support for Israel.
I'm going to be next. See, now what am I going to do?
It's in here. Check those.
Hello?
I don't know if you can hear.
That's not it.
'Em. Okay. Exit.
I was just back to my.
Okay.
I was just back to my.
Okay.
Okay.
No, not hearing anything.
Go on, Brad. Go on, Brad.
I'm sorry. What? Take me back.
So it was Ukraine. So I mean,
Where
so
we
Nick
went
and
out.
Haley put an emphasis on Ukraine and the importance of backing it, unlike the other main
Oh,
candidates. And then but you were mentioning a meeting that we had with a former congressman who's very right wing here, who actually got kicked out by the Republican Party. We need to mute Alan Livingston's microphone as well, please. Can we mute Alison Livingston's microphone?
I think we just read your thing.
And mute Audrey Wolf's microphone as well, please. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that, everyone. It's there's open mics can be a problem sometimes. So yeah, the two candidates. So both Trump, Vivek too. Not much discussion about Ukraine, but we know that supporters don't want American involvement in Ukraine, and there's pressure on Ukraine to have some kind of settlement with Russia. But we had a very interesting discussion with a former congressman here, who I think is quite representative of conservative opinion. Can you tell us about that, Brad?
He used to represent that Northwest Iowa where we were. You might remember him, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. He was, he got a lot of controversy for talking about protecting. It was a lot of white nationalism talk, a lot of. He said he was misquoted, but the bottom line was it was so outrageous that Kevin McCarthy, at that point, they were still trying to keep the crazies down, if you will, the MAGA folk down, and the Republicans took away his committee assignments and essentially forced him out. They primaried him, the establishment did, and he lost his next election. He's still around Iowa, and he came back to Iowa, stuck around, and he's working around eminent domain issue. And I think the significance of what I heard is that two things that King said that I thought were one was hopeful, both were hopeful, I guess. First was he has grievances with Trump. He had grievances with the establishment, and so there's a fracture in that part of the Republican Party. But what I also found encouraging was he was actually quite in favor of support for Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think that was he was very strong. So I just repeat his name again because you cut out. So it's former Congressman Steve King. He comes from the area that we visited around. It's Denison, and he was very strong. He basically compared it to defeating the Nazis. Americans standing up for liberty and freedom within Europe, and he thought it was as equally as important. And so I thought that was perhaps reassuring if you're around the rest of the world and you're worried about U.S. involvement or the failure to support Ukraine and backing for NATO. That was, I think, an indication that among many conservatives there was a feeling that the U.S. should do so. So I think that goes some way to answering your question. What about Biden's age and Trump's age? What did anyone raise? When you say did anyone raise the question, Alan, are you talking about? Are we talking about voters? I'm guessing. Yeah, we can't hear you still, Alan. So I'm guessing it must be voters. What the react? Can you recall that, Brad? Voters are concerned about their age.
Well, I mean, Haley's whole campaign is kind of the new generation. Let's put Trump and Biden in the rearview mirror and look forward. Aren't we all ready for something more or something different? Biden. References I always took to Biden's age were just about his competency, and it all just seemed to be wrapped into one with Biden. Because he's old, he can't be good, he can't be mentally competent. I mean, there's a lot of comments that way, but it was all just part of the orthodoxy of Republicans, that it wasn't even something that stood out, that they would call Biden a bumbling fool and things like that. There was. Somebody said it's not their age, it's their competence or their ability to do what they can do. And therefore, Trump at 77 and Biden at 80 can still be a dramatic difference in ages. So yeah, I think both Israel and Biden's age are just so baked into the Republican thinking that they barely even mention it because it's all just agreed upon.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay. Audrey, how do you take that? I mean, in terms of Biden's age, Audrey, you were here on a previous tour. I think we need to open your microphone so we can hear you this time. But go on, Audrey.
Well,
Yeah, we can hear
first,
you.
I just want to remind you that last time when I was there in Iowa, Trump did speak for an hour and 45 minutes. Awesome. He likes to do that. But they loved it, you said. I'm wondering, as we move on, there was so much, what I consider so much publicity. I watched so much about pre-Iowa and then Iowa, and won't it fade somewhat as we move to New Hampshire and then to South Carolina and then to Super Tuesday, all those places, and we'll start to focus differently. I'm certainly hoping that the public will seriously listen at those occasions.
So, I mean, Brad, is that a fair comment? I mean, basically, Iowa is a very conservative state. It's not representative of the rest of the United States. And so, therefore, Trump's not going to do so well elsewhere.
Well, I guess we're going to have to see. But I mean, we've been writing Trump's obituary for quite a while, and he still surprises. That particular group of Iowans is pretty small, and not they're representative of, I think, of the Republican Party, the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, and I think we saw the establishment pushing back. But I think Trump will do very well across the country in the Republican Party.
Yeah, okay. And so Dave, you're still listening in. I mean, what does this come down to then, Dave? If we can take for granted that the MAGA support, the Republican support, the base is going to be there, it's going to be very solid. The question, I guess, is about independent voters and then where those votes are. So that's crucial. Just give us an outline of what if the Democrats need to win, where do they need to win, who do they need to win over?
Well, they need to energize what worked for them 4 years ago. They also need to capitalize on some of the social issues that have emerged. Most especially, we've seen success in several states, which are conservative states, over the abortion issue, and places that like Kansas or Ohio, where you wouldn't have expected success. And so they're going to have to do that. Again, they're going to have to capitalize on their strengths, not their weaknesses. And their strengths are that they have an economy working for them. All of that part is part and parcel of what they've got to do moving forward. The inevitability, by Super Tuesday, it's going to be over in the Republican. Barring something with regard to morbidity or mortality, it's all over for the GOP by Super Tuesday, I think, and is the way that it's going to be. By mid-March, it's just going to be done, unless something unforeseen. I'm parroting what Brad's saying. There just really doesn't seem to be anything out there that is going to change any of this. And so the strategy at some point here for Trump is he's going to have to start running as a candidate, not just a GOP candidate, but a U.S. candidate. He's got to start reaching out beyond MAGA. MAGA may be a big fraction of the people that voted in Iowa, but I don't know what fraction MAGA is of the United States, and the degree to which Donald Trump's behaviors currently as an incumbent candidate, how those behaviors reflect on the remainder of the Republican base and on the remainder of the independents. I see polls that say support by independents is incredibly soft with regard to people who are independent but tend to vote Republican. But it's also very, very early in the polling season, and I just really don't embrace a lot of polling right now. 4 years ago, polling didn't tell us that Biden had a chance. And so we're just going to take it, one primary at a time, one group of primaries at a time. But really, we're going to only start getting some clarity with regard to the race when we see how Trump emerges out of Super Tuesday and he becomes then a national candidate and not a state-by-state candidate.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, what is one issue that could cleave this party is a conviction. Once he's a convicted felon, I think that polls consistently show 12% of that base goes away. And 12% of 45 million votes, 75 million votes is, 11 million votes or something like that. And Republicans haven't won a general election for president in quite some time. I mean, George Bush's second reelect, but so they're already a minority party, and a conviction is going to chop them off even more. And I think they're fighting over election denialism and some other issues like book banning. We didn't hear anything about book banning either. I think that's an internal fight with the party. Some people want to move away from that. They want to move away from election denial, and other people are still swamped in it, and they purposely kept that out.
There's a question here from Sarah Biffin. He says, "And is this really a job done for Trump? Despite what Brad says about the strength of the Democrats, what are the numbers? Is there really enough time for Biden to move forward? I mean, there's Dave, I get there isn't enough time. We heard a couple of speakers who said that the trials are not going to, there won't be an indictment. There won't be time for an indictment before the election, and it would be more likely than afterwards. I mean, what do you make of that, Dave?
Well, yeah, no, well, there have been indictments. What we haven't had is active trials or convictions. And there's every possibility that the January 6th trial might move forward. It may encroach into the heavy campaign period, but the trial might be ongoing. At that time, the special counsel doesn't have any obligation to not try him during the campaign period, and that's it. We also have a series of other things. First of all, we've got this. He's been found civilly liable for sexual assault. The other sexual assault trial involving the same person is started today. He is being found culpable with regard to his business dealings in New York State. What's basically left there, the only thing that's left in New York State with regard to is basically having behaved fraudulently in his business dealings in New York, is the penalty phase. And so, I mean, these are things that properly framed can be put up as advertisements to impugn the character of this candidate over and over and over again.
Okay, well, it's far from over. We're going to have to wrap up in just a second, but Brad, just a few final thoughts from you.
The electorate that votes in November is going to be entirely different than sort of what we're seeing now. And the arguments are going to be different. And the choice is going to be quite clear. So I think between that, the abortion issue, and then the freedom issues, the fear of, of election denialism, we didn't even talk about the fact people said they don't care if we don't have a democracy.
Yeah, that was one.
That scares the hell out of most people.
Yeah, you're breaking up there slightly at this end, but yes, that was one thing I heard, as I think I mentioned it earlier, a guy next to me in that meeting in Denison saying that the democracy doesn't matter, it's the republic and the constitution. That was pretty concerning. Well, listen, thank you both very much indeed. It's been a great conversation. Dave Swenson is out on the road, I think in South Dakota or North Dakota. Where are you, Dave?
I'm in western South Dakota looking at large snowdrifts as I sit by the side of the road.
Oh, and there's one reminder here that's just come up on the screen. We weren't the only political tourists in Des Moines. Nigel Farage, who's described as the godfather of Brexit in the Wall Street Journal today, looking rather sort of mafioso-like in his thick pinstriped suit. I managed to have a quick conversation with him before the Trump rally, and people recognized him. Lots of people came up to him and sort of clapped him on the back and said great work on Brexit. So yeah, the populists were united there. Excellent. Listen, thank you very much, everyone. My thanks to Brad. My thanks to Dave Swenson. We've had a fantastic tour here. It's been a really, really amazing one, despite the tour, despite the cold. The access we've had, seeing and getting to understand why people support Trump here, understanding Republican conservatives, rural conservatives, has been, I think, really, really important and really, really informative. We are running our election tour in October to November. We've got a tour that starts in Michigan. It's in Michigan for most of the time, Detroit and Lansing, and then we will be in DC. And we've got significant interest in that tour. Please do get in touch. And then we may be doing a second tour as well.